Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Lust is Boring. If you're like me, you're a great fan, a devotee, someone who loves St. John Paul II. And like me as a human being, you long for authentic human love. And you know what he has said on that subject is pure gold. But sometimes it's a bit philosophical, heavy on the theology, a little bit dense to wade through. And so today we're going to have on the show Dr. Edward Sri, who's broken open St. John Paul II's book, Love and Responsibility, making these jewels, these gems of what makes authentic love distinguishable from a counterfeit of lust, making these accessible for everybody. So whether you're married, single, dating, looking for love, man, the gold that is in the writing of St. John Paul II. We have today on the show a gifted author who has mined through those resources and is going to be able to walk us through the basics of human attraction. How do you know this person might be the right one? What are some pitfalls we can fall into in making the wrong relationship decisions? Distinguishing love from lust. How to have not just a lasting marriage of quantity of years, but quality of years. All kinds of stuff we're going to dive into today. So you're not going to want to miss the show. Before we go, though, want to make sure to thank one of our sponsors, Covenant Eyes. They've got a program called Strive 21. If you or somebody you know is struggling with pornography, you got to do this thing. It's a 21-day free program. You can just click the link in the show notes to try it out. And every day you're going to get videos, tremendous content, Matt Fradd, really how to break free. Because a lot of people are like, look, I've been trying for years and years. Nothing is doing the trick. I feel like I'm getting nowhere, make progress for a week and fall back in. Give a shot to try Strive 21. Like I said, it's free. Click the link in the show notes, and it is a life-changing program for you, your spouse, your partner, yourself. You got to check that out. I also want to thank our supporters on Patreon. Those who support us on Patreon make this entire show possible, and all the editing of the videos, everything we put on YouTube every day. Patron supporters who are listening, just dude, thank you for your continued support. If you want to help out as well, just go to patreon.com/Jason Everett. Make a gift of any amount there monthly, and then you get all kinds of free swag. And as I'd mentioned, YouTube, we're releasing videos every single day on YouTube. And I want to encourage you to subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're going to have a raffle here real soon, picking 5 new subscribers and then giving away free resources. A book I wrote on St. John Paul II, If You Really Loved Me, I think Theology of the Body in 1 hour. I'm going to give all this stuff away to new subscribers. So make sure to subscribe there. But without further delay, I want to bring onto the show good friend, a longtime friend, Dr. Edward Sri from Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University students out in Denver. Dr. Sri, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jason.
Now, I've been not only a longtime friend of you, but a longtime supporter of Focus. If any of our viewers are not familiar with the Fellowship of Catholic University students, when I go to speak at high schools and I talk to any kids about where they're thinking of going to college, you know, I'll point them out to some good Catholic colleges out there, but I'm like, look, if you're going to go to like some of these other state universities, dude, first thing you got to do, find out if they have a focus group on campus, and you reach out to those folks and you get in touch with those focus missionaries before you even step foot on that college campus. Because if you get plugged in to the right set of people before college starts, the next 4 years are going to be incredible. And so Focus is where I send absolutely everybody. And Dr. Sri, you take care of the formation of the missionaries there. So maybe tell the listeners a little bit about Focus.
Yeah, Focus it's amazing. I was blessed to be a part of the very beginning. My good friend Curtis Martin was the one who founded it, but we founded it together way back in 1998 at Benedictine College when I was teaching there, and we launched it, and it has now grown to serve tens of thousands of young people on college campuses across the United States, overseas in Europe now. We have about 1,000 missionaries that give 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years of their life to really go out to a great field of evangelization. People think evangelization is out into the jungles of Africa or something, you know, but the college campus is its own jungle, as you know, and how important it is to get connected when you go away to campus. And that's what Focus is trying to do, is to do the work of evangelization, draw people into the authentic understanding of what life is all about, friendship, God, and love. That's some things we're going to talk about here today. And then they raise up leaders, college students who go out and evangelize their peers as well. So we're on 180 campuses full time. We serve 300 campuses digitally. And it's been just a blessing these 20 plus years to see so many young people give their lives wholeheartedly to the Lord Jesus and their Catholic faith.
And it's an amazing thing to witness, like to go to the Sikh conferences. I was at one once, and I don't know, there's probably 13,000 college students there, and the processional line for the priests to get from the back of the conference room to the altar was a quarter of a mile. And I spoke to one of the elderly priests afterwards, and he had a little Fitbit that he wears to keep track of his movement. And he said, I've already done half the steps I need for the entire day just to get to the altar and back. And so, but it gives you an idea that how beautiful that is to see tens of thousands of college students. And you do a lot of work with them, ministering to them. And I think that was part of your target audience when you're writing the book, Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. St. John Paul II's book, Love and Responsibility, for me was kind of the gateway drug into the theology of the body, and it is the foundation of our whole chastity ministry. Maybe why did you write this book? I know there's a lot of confusion on sexuality, but, to go to an elderly celibate Polish philosopher for answers, why'd you write the book?
Yeah, I would go back to those early years of my teaching at Benedictine College. I was teaching a class for the first time on theology of the body. I was all excited to put this class together, and I spent the winter break really prepping. And I would go down to that Benedictine Abbey crypt. I think you've been down there, Jason. And I was just down there reading. And I wanted to read the background of theology of the body, this earlier work that John Paul II had written. And I'd read it before in my graduate studies, but I wanted to review it as I was getting ready for this class. And I remember being down there and just reading like a paragraph at a time and just being in awe. I would go maybe like 10 pages an hour, partly because, as you know, it's pretty thick reading, but more because I was just personally moved. It was like an examination of conscience for me. I was seeing this is the beautiful high standard of what friendship is, of what love is, of what marriage should be. And I saw in my own life, my own weaknesses and faults and how I wasn't living it in my own marriage. And it really was deeply moving. And I was just combing through every little line of this book. And I also began to see, just knowing the students, like how valuable this was going to be for their dating relationships and casting a vision to build the proper foundation for friendship and courtship. And I knew that this was going to shed a lot of light on the hurts that they've had in dating relationships. Just because you're Catholic and love Jesus and go to adoration doesn't mean you're going to get dating right. You're going to make many mistakes if you don't have the right principles. And JP2, like no one else, gives us that clear guidance. So when I taught this TOB class, and every year since then, whenever I teach this class, I spend almost half the semester on love and responsibility, because once you get that, then TOB is so much easier. And there's no other book that sheds more light on the mystery of the dynamic of relationships between men and women, attraction, love, lust, sexuality, emotional sentimentality, all those things. He puts it together so beautifully. And as a friend of mine says, TOB is awesome, but love and responsibility changes the way you treat your wife on a Monday morning. It changes the way you approach that girl on campus on when you see her on Tuesday afternoon. It's immediately applicable. And I just love being able to unpack that for the ordinary lay Catholic.
Let's take the listeners through a tour, in a sense, I think, of human love, from attraction to discernment to dating to marriage to all that. Maybe just starting with attraction. I know I talked to a lot of people who struggle with like wondering, is this attraction a sin? What is going on there? Maybe can you share with us what John Paul says about attraction? And then specifically, at what point does a sexual attraction become sinful? Because I think a lot of people think it's a sin to feel the attraction. Could you maybe help us look at this issue through the lens of John Paul II of attraction and when sexual attractions become a sin?
Yeah. Well, let's first just tackle attraction itself, because God made us this way. We're wired to be attracted to the opposite sex. John Paul II calls this, that what human persons have is the sexual urge, which is something different than just what animals have, where they act on instinct. So in human persons, we're wired to be attracted to the opposite sex in two main ways. We have a physical attraction that he calls sensuality. So that's just what everybody knows. You're attracted to her good looks, those sexy legs or whatever. You're just attracted to the body. It's a physical attraction to the physical features, the body of the other person. But he also talks about a second kind of attraction. He calls this a psychological, we're attracted to the psychological qualities of the other person. This is a more emotional, or he calls it sentimentality. It's an emotional attraction to the psychological features of the other person, most particularly what JP2 describes it as the femininity of the woman or the masculinity of the man. It's like the mystery of the opposite sex. So we know that in attractions, there's always something more than physical going on, right? I mean, there could be a guy at a coffee house and he's sipping on his coffee and a beautiful girl walks in, boom, he's immediately attracted, but let's say he's, seen her here before with her friends at this time, which is why he's here again at this time because he wants to see her again. And he notices her warm smile, her joyful personality, and she's really outgoing, whatever it is. There's something more than just the physical looks that we're attracted to. And JP2 says both of these things are good when you notice you've got that physical attraction towards someone or an emotional attraction towards someone. That's, just applaud and say, I'm a human being. That's awesome. God wired us this way. But when it falls into a kind of something that's sinful, is when we focus on the qualities themselves and what we get out of them. You see, because John Paul II, I want to make sure everybody gets this, is that while everybody has what he calls sexual value, that's the physical appearance and the psychological qualities. We all have sexual value. But deep down, more than that, we all have just value as a human person. Like my wife is beautiful, but she's beautiful more than just her physical good looks, and she's more than her psychological qualities. It's her soul, it's her character, it's her virtue. That's who she is. She has value as a daughter of God, made in the image and likeness of God, so that's the core of who we are. And we don't notice that. Like, you don't walk down in the downtown of a big city and go, wow, look, there's a beautiful soul. No, you just go, no, there's a really good looking girl, So you notice the physical qualities and the psychological qualities first. But the danger is when we reduce the person to just those qualities that I might admire, but I get some pleasure from it. So I can look at this other person, I see their good looks, and that's fine. But I can then start kind of just in my mind imagining, having a sexual fantasy with this person, and I'm focusing just on their physical appearance and the pleasure that I derive in thinking about them or staring at them. That's called lust, and that's called I'm just using the person. I'm not really interested in the person at that point. I'm more interested in just what pleasure do I get out of them? That sexual feeling I get when I'm admiring their good looks. So that's when you're starting to fall into sin. I think of an analogy about the story of Bathsheba and David in the Bible. Could I share a little bit about that, Jason?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking. Like when it comes to lustful thoughts, like how do I know it's really falling into sin? So this famous story you can read about in 1 Samuel. It describes King David, who happens to wake up one day and he looks out, his window, and he happens to see this beautiful girl bathing. Now, he didn't necessarily seek it out. It kind of just happened. It wasn't like he was planning this. He just happened to notice it. So like you see a beautiful girl bathing, you might notice something, like that's, there's no sin there. But what David does is what he should do is just turn away. He should run away at that moment, right? But what he does, he kind of goes, oh, wow, beautiful girl, naked. And he starts looking a little more. And then what starts happening inside of him is there's this attraction to just this body. He's not really interested in who she is. She doesn't really know who she is. He's just interested in her body, starting to have a lustful imagination about her. That's when you're starting to fall into sin. And I think what John Paul II brings out is there's this kind of gray area in between of I'm driving down the highway, I see a billboard of a girl in a bikini. I didn't plan that. It's just there. I notice it. That's not sin. But if I just keep driving and I keep looking at that bikini and I start remembering the little girl in the bikini, now I'm starting to like give into sin. But then that area in between, the key is this. Like maybe I look away. I don't want to look at that billboard. So I drive by, but I have the image in my head. So I keep thinking about that girl. The image of the girl in the bikini keeps coming in my head. And I go, I don't want it there. And I'm resisting. And I know maybe I say a Hail Mary, or I tell the Lord, I say the Jesus prayer, or I keep trying to distract myself. I'm really fighting against that image of the bikini in my head. And, like John Paul II says, you're battling still. That's not sin. It's when I just give up and I say, you know what? I remember that image of the girl in the bikini. I'm just going to keep thinking about it. I'm going to allow myself to ponder this and have a sexual fantasy about this. Once I stop resisting, that's kind of like the fine line of now I've fallen into sin. And again, I think JP2 is so beautiful how he, is very human. He acknowledges, look, you're going to have sexual attraction. You may notice things that just happen spontaneously. You didn't plan. You're human. That's ordinary. And then you may even have to battle and you're resisting, you're trying to fight. As long as you are still resisting, you haven't fallen into sin. But it's when you give up resistance and you just say, I'm just going to enjoy this. That, whether it's a lustful thought, it's looking at an image on the screen, something you do with your girlfriend, whatever that is, once you stop resisting, that's when, you've fallen into sin.
Yeah. So in a sense, grasping, once you get to that point of consuming, taking, using, then it becomes the sin, and something I often tell the guys in terms of resistance, in a sense, I think part of the conflict is being caused because you think that the answer to her body is no, when the answer to the body is like, yes. I mean, you should respond in love. And so not using her in your imagination is an act of love. Maybe pausing and praying for whoever that woman is an act of love. And so make sure that you're understanding that you're not rejecting sexuality, you're not rejecting the goodness of the sexual value of the body. You're just trying to order those desires. I think it was interesting with David and Bathsheba. You read between the lines there. He didn't wake up in the morning, he woke from a nap.
It was in the afternoon.
He was napping in the afternoon. And it also says at the time of the year when the kings would go off to war with their armies, he's home napping and walking around on the rooftop. And so idleness in a sense was the ground in which he found himself in temptation. Now, it's not to mean that any temptation it's partly your fault, you're idle. I mean, they're going to come, but man, how many more come, when we're idle? And so I think that's helpful in terms of understanding, at what point does that become sin? It's only through the door of consent, because the devil can bang on the door all day long, but it's not until we let him in through our consent, not by what we feel, but how we respond, that it becomes a sin. So let's say experience that attraction. You're battling your temptations, and you meet someone nice. You want to enter into that relationship. You mentioned in the book that there's two pitfalls that young couples can fall into when they're in a dating relationship. Could you quick kind of explain what are those two things that young singles should be on the lookout for?
Well, the one we've already kind of just touched on here, it's that, that sensual attraction when you start to, focus the relationship on the physical stuff, and so this is where when you're doing things, not just sex, but the things that are meant to lead up to sex, that's a clear area where you're falling into use, because these are acts that are meant to be oriented toward the full gift of yourself in sexual intimacy, which is made for marriage. And we can get into all that. And you've so eloquently spoken and written about that a lot. I'm sure you talked about it on the show. So that's the sensuality area. And we have to be really on guard in our relationships and really protecting the purity of ourselves and the one we love when we're in a dating relationship. But again, that's been written about and talked about a lot. It's the other side I think is fascinating that many people don't think about as much. We all get, okay, I can use someone sexually, but we don't realize how much we can use people emotionally. And John Paul II gets into this a lot too. That emotional attraction, I might not ever touch this girl, right? But you're falling in love and your heart just is, just pitter patter all the time. And you're thinking about the person all the time. We can use people emotionally. And how does that work? So John Paul II, he makes this point that that feelings are blind. And I see this in a lot of, even devout, committed Catholics that love Jesus. They go to adoration. They're all committed on the physical side of chastity. But, they show up at that campus ministry event, and there's some new guy there. He's a transfer, in the January semester. And he's pretty good looking, and he's got, 8.5 out of your top 12 qualities that you're longing for in that perfect, future husband, and you have a 20-minute conversation with that person. And all of a sudden this girl is, leaves thinking about this guy. She can't wait for the next campus ministry night. She's praying for him, and she's thinking about the wedding dress. And I know that sounds crazy, but so many women around the world have told me, yes, that can happen. 20-minute conversation with a guy, you can immediately go to the wedding dress. So what happens? You're starting to idealize this person. You only had a 20-minute conversation with him, but you make him out to be like, blessed Pier Giorgio, and you can picture your wedding, and, you've got the dress, he's got the pipe, and you're on the mountain, and it's just amazing. And it's kind of, and when you let your mind wander that way, that's not real. It's not real because, it doesn't mean this guy's a bad guy, but you don't know him yet. And you shouldn't allow your emotions to get so far ahead because you're falling in love, not with the real person, but with this ideal that you created. So there's a line I quote in the book. I'll mention it here. It's from John Paul II. I quote it in the book here. He says, "In the eyes of a person sentimentally committed to the other person, the value of the beloved grows enormously. as a rule out of all proportion to his or her real value.
As a
It's just,
rule, yeah.
as a rule. In other words, if you think that you don't emotionally exaggerate, and idealize the person you're falling in love with, you're not living in reality. That's probably a sign of how far out of reality you are. In other words, we all do it, and don't freak out about it. Just know I'm probably idealizing this person,
Yeah.
and that's, just but being aware that I'm doing that. And I'm human, bringing that to prayer, bringing it to my spiritual director, talking with my friends, getting a good sense from other people. So am I seeing this relationship for what it really is? Because, I just over the last 20 years, well, no, maybe not 20 years. I think the book's been out 15 years. But the new edition, what we did was we interviewed people from all around the world that have been using this book. So this book's been used for like young adult groups in Dublin to Dubai to Sydney and New York, and so we interviewed dozens and dozens of young people on how the ideas, not from me but from JP2, that are written in the book, have impacted them. But one story I heard over and over again was just how both men and women, like so much, this point challenged them the most. They realized, wow, if I had a chance to do it all over again, I wish I could see clearly. Here's what one guy said. I'll quote it here. So we tell their stories in the book. He said, if I wrote down on a sheet of paper the things my girlfriends actually said, how they acted, and what they believed, there's no way I would have continued dating them.
Wow.
In other words, like when you had to write it all down, this is what my girlfriend says, this is what she believes, this is what she does, and you just list all those things, you're kind of like, ooh, that's not the kind of person I want to date. But when your emotions are so given away, you
Yeah.
kind of like look over all those things. Another a woman said this. She said, I started to see how he treated his family and his roommate, and then I started noticing how he was treating me. I sensed there were problems, but I kept telling myself, oh, he's not that bad. He's not always like that. But if I were on the outside and saw my friend going through a relationship like that, I would have done all I could to convince her to get out of it. But I gave my heart too much too fast, and I couldn't see what was going on. I think for committed Catholics who get chastity on the physical side, this is an area that they need to be challenged on. How much do I let idealization kind of rule my relationships? I let my heart and my feelings lead the way. That's always going to lead to a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's such an important point. I mean, that everybody enters into a relationship with these preconceived hopes and expectations of who the person's going to be. And then if they exhibit even the smallest bit of that trait, we just bestow upon them the fullness of that virtue beyond any reasonable bounds. And John Paul II says, some of us don't do this some of the time. All of us do this all of the time. But it's just so good to see long-term what ends up happening, when you start painting this image and like, oh no, the person is that, the person is that. Then when the red flags hit, some people, to deal with the disconnect, actually enter deeper into the relationship. They invest more into it, into this illusion where they're not chasing after a dream. They start chasing after this nightmare, thinking, no, if I just give more, if I just commit more, then it's going to come around. I just got to give more, give more, give more. And then they find themselves neck deep, don't know how to get out of it, and, are in this extremely difficult situation. So it all goes back to, are we looking at this thing, with clear vision?
I think this is super applicable also for married couples. So I've done retreats on this book, certainly for tons of young adults and college students, but I've also done it for priests, clergy conferences, religious contemplative nuns, and lots of married couples. And one of the things that comes up with the married folks is, you're married and everyone thinks, oh, marriage is wonderful. And then you get into it, 7 months or 7 years, and it's really hard and demanding. And your spouse isn't as perfect as you thought they were. And they hurt you sometimes, and they let you down sometimes, and they misunderstand or they don't appreciate. The temptation, what can happen in marriage is you can start telling yourself this thing like, oh, my spouse doesn't appreciate me, but those people at work, she appreciates me. Oh, and I bet, I see that wife over there and how much she loves and admires her husband. And, my wife doesn't admire me. And you can play this game in your head, almost like, again, idealizing other people, other marriages. And that's super dangerous because no marriage is perfect. Everyone has troubles in the marriage. And whatever's going on in your marriage, it's the person right there before you. Jesus wants to meet you in your spouse, not in this imagination of an ideal outside here. And if you ever find yourself kind of emotionally or in your imagination thinking, oh, well, if I was in this relationship, this person would treat me better. If you get that thought in your head, just immediately get on your knees and pray, because that is not from Jesus. That's from the devil, and he's trying to divide you. And I've shared this with priests and sisters, and they tell me the same thing. I remember a missionary charity sister, like one of the superiors told me, Dr. Schramm, I'm so grateful you went through all this, because they'll see, even sometimes, these are beautiful sisters. They love Jesus. They do 2 holy hours a day. They're amazing. But some of the young novices, all of a sudden they meet like a young volunteer, a layman that shows up to help, and he's really nice and he's kind, and they get all these emotions and like wondering, oh my goodness, does that mean, is it a vocation crisis? Am I supposed to be married? And it's like, no, you're human. You're attracted to the opposite sex. It's okay, but don't let that idealization keep you from your true vocation where God is calling you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I can understand, as a celibate, I can imagine a priest standing on the altar looking out all these marriages, and they just seem all happy in their Sunday best, almost kind of like a teenager looking through Instagram reels of all his classmates and seeing all the brightest and shiniest moments of everybody's day and feeling like he's on the outside. And what am I missing out on here? It's just, well, everybody's got their cross, and I think with the celibate life, in a sense, the joys are hidden, but the crosses are evident, where in the married life, the joy is evident, and then the crosses are hidden. And so those inside know the weight of the cross, but to those looking from the outside, it's like, oh, sunshine lollipops, but having this, clear vision going in, okay, the cross is going to come, Christ crucified is going to visit every couple in their own way. And so when couples are in the dating stage, how can you help them distinguish a mature love from an immature love? What are some of the qualities, characteristics that would distinguish those?
Okay, yeah, and this is JP2's language, and I write about in the book. But he talks, a mature love is when, an immature love is when you're kind of always looking and thinking, okay, am I sexually attracted to this person? Am I physically attracted to this person? And do I get good feelings with this person? Is there a lot of romantic, emotions inside? And John Paul II says, that's a very immature love. That's not really love. That's just you're having a psychological reaction. Not just you're just reacting to things. Real love, a mature love, is about what really exists between the two people in reality, not just my emotions or my sensuality. And that involves ultimately, I think this is where you get to the title of the book: Love and Responsibility. Do I really love this other person? Am I really committed to them and seeking? Because what is love? Is, the definition of love is to will the good of the other, seek what's best for the other person. That has nothing, zero, to do with my feelings or sexual attraction. Zero. When my little kid gets up at 3 a.m, I don't have a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings, but I have to love my kid and take care of him. So that's what love is. And then and it leads to a sense of responsibility to care for this other person as a gift. So just take it out of romance, just caring for my little child in the middle of the night. That's responsibility. Do I have that same sense of love and responsibility for the one I love? So how do I know that? And this is the key here. And John Paul II brings this out. If we're going to have real, genuine love, we need virtue. In other words, anyone could say, I love you. Some people might sincerely mean it, but it's only those that actually have the virtue, character, that are capable of loving. Think of virtue as kind of like a skill. I was just with my folks in Chicago. I got to see my dad. He's a retired surgeon. And I grew up admiring surgery. He took me to meet his patients, showed me anatomy books as a kid. So I have a lot of excitement about surgery. I get passionate about surgery. It's kind of fun because I think of my dad. But Jason, if I heard you needed surgery and I said, oh, Jason, get on the operating table, I'll do the surgery for you. Would you want me to do that?
Unlikely.
I'm not that kind of doctor, right? I don't have the skills of the surgeon, right? That's obvious, right? You would never get on the operating table with someone that doesn't have the skills of a surgeon. And yet, how many people jump into dating relationships, marriage, without ever asking the question of virtue? Does this person have the virtue to love me, the skill to love me? That's what the virtues are. They're like the life skills to love. So to the extent I'm generous, I can do generous things to love my wife, my children, and my friends. To the extent that I'm courageous, I can do courageous things for the sake of others. To the extent that I have self-control and I'm self-possessed, I can give myself in love to others, right? But to the extent I lack kindness, patience, generosity, I will do unkind things, impatient things, selfish things that hurt my wife and hurt my kids. So the idea of living theology of the body, living love and responsibility isn't just like, oh, I got this great map, I want to give myself as a gift. Well, okay, great. How are you going to do it? you need to grow in virtue
Mhm. Yeah.
and taking on the character of Christ. That's the key. And so the number one thing now, JP2, he writes about it subtly, but it comes in the book. And he's drawing on the great tradition of Aristotle and Aquinas and the virtues, that if we want to live just basic friendship, we want to live dating and courtship well, we want to live marriage and family well, especially, we've got to go after virtue in our own lives because virtue gives us the freedom to love.
Yeah. And so in the end, that's the key to a successful marriage more than anything is virtue. Because a lot of people think, well, those people were married for like 60 years. It was a successful marriage. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they hate each other's guts for 6 decades. Yeah, I mean, we got to look at quantity of years. That's great. They didn't leave, but how do we build in the quality of those years? I guess the only answer then is virtue. Are we entering into marriage mature and formed, capable of living virtue with all the people in our lives, or just kind of, dreamy that this person's going to fulfill me forever, but I haven't even put in the hard work to develop virtue in my own life?
Yeah, I want to speak right now to all of the single people watching, whether you're, in high school, college, a young adult, an older adult that's single. Right now, if you are called to marriage, you're in marriage prep right now. And the best marriage prep, you may not be taking classes, but the most important marriage prep you can be doing right now is going after virtue in your life. Some people think, oh, I'll grow in all these virtues later in life. I can just enjoy life now. No, you're developing habits, and you're going to take your habits into your marriage for better or for worse. And if your habits aren't virtuous, it's going to be a lot worse for you and your future spouse. So love your future spouse now by serving the poor right now. Love your future spouse now by dying to yourself and your preferences and thinking of other people and putting others before yourself now. Start loving your future spouse and children now by fulfilling your commitments. No matter what interesting thing comes over here, you know what? I'm committed. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there. I'm going to serve, because that's what marriage and family life is all about. It's not about serving when it's interesting and convenient for you. It's about serving precisely when it's not interesting or convenient. So develop those muscles now of virtue, and you'll be free to give yourself more in your future marriage.
No, it's gold. And you mentioned giving yourself the marriage. In the book, one thing you mentioned in terms of married couples, that one thing that harms love within marriage is contraception. And some people push back and like, oh, yeah, you want us to have 15 kids, and then, that's going to harm love. These kids that we can't, take care of emotionally, psychologically, financially, we need this. How does contraception in and of itself damage marital love?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I know you have a large family, and I do as well. Well, I would actually say you and I have medium-sized families.
Historically, yeah.
I've got 8 kids, and that's actually just average. It should be, but we live in a culture that doesn't see children as a blessing. We live in a culture that tends to look at marriage more in terms of like what this person's going to do for me. And again, I meet many devout Catholics that think I just want to find my vocation, but they think their vocation's about something, this person fulfilling me. And if you go into marriage thinking that you're longing for this person to fulfill you, you're in for a train wreck here, because a vocation is about giving yourself away to serve others. And one of the best ways to do this is to, give yourself, not just to your spouse, but in the openness to children, serving those children. I remember my wife and I were doing a marriage, and we were interviewed for some, I don't know, a podcast, or I don't know what it was, but this is like this last year. And somebody asked us the question saying, well, what advice would you give to a couple that's kind of like, they feel like their marriage is just in a rut, just kind of humdrum, not bad, but just it's lost the spice, the life, and all. What would you do? And I'm starting to think of, these abstract things about, well, maybe they could do this marriage retreat or something like this. And my wife just all of a sudden jumps in and says, they should have another baby. Because what John Paul II points out is that when we have a child, like real love isn't just like staring into each other's eyes and, you make me feel so good. Real love is more like shoulder to shoulder, and we're looking outward to serve something bigger than ourselves. And that, that could be, the church, the community, serving God, of course. But when you're blessed with children, that's where the love of husband and wife is strengthened the most. Yes, children are taxing, exhausting, and all of that. But it's the number one gift that God gives us to grow in generosity and to grow in love, and that's what we're made for. We're made to die to ourselves and grow in greater love. Now there's theology behind this, as this beautiful act of sexuality, this physical, giving of yourself to each other is meant to express a profound, personal gift of oneself. Giving their very bodies to each other, they're giving their very selves to each other in the sexual act in marriage. But when we use contraception, what we're basically doing is saying, I give everything to you except, my fertility, that which is deepest in me, or I give everything to you except the possibility of being a parent with you again. I accept everything about you except this one part. It's actually put selfishness right at the very center, at the very heart of what's supposed to be the most unifying, or at least like the physical expression of the unifying love of the husband and wife. It actually builds selfishness right there. And that's why Paul VI predicted all of these horrible problems in the world if the world embraces contraception. He talked about how it was going to lead to abortion. It was going to lead to greater divorce and the breakdown of the family. It would lead to homosexuality. He predicted all that. Because when you put selfishness right there, you allow it there, then you're going to allow it everywhere else. So.
Yeah, no, one of the things I'd like to last ask you before we wrap up is I love the concept in John Paul II's Love and Responsibility where he talks about resenting chastity. That, some people, kind of dismiss it because they realize it's challenging. And so instead of giving it the respect that it deserves and say, no, that's too much effort, they just diminish its value, degrade it, talk about it being unhealthy, unrealistic, burdensome, puritanical. They have this outright resentment of the virtue itself. So it's not simply like, no, I don't feel like being patient, or I don't feel like that virtue. It's like, no, I have to go after the virtue itself to undermine it, to excuse myself that I'm refusing its demands. Share with us the vision of JP2 on that.
Well, let me use you as an example. So you have this big, project called Chastity Project, right? Like, so people in the secular world hate that, or maybe not even the secular. There might be Christians that see, here's the standard of chastity, and they know in their own lives, I'm not living according to it. Now, look, that happens in all of our lives, right? There's many standards of holiness that I know I'm not living to, and I want to aspire to it. So when you see, here's the standard, and I'm falling short, there's two reactions. One could be, Jesus, I'm sorry. I want to get better. Give me the grace. Help me. I go to confession. I pray. Help me to live. This fullness of life that you call me to. That's one response, and that's what the high standard should do. But there's another response, and that is, I'm not living according to that standard. I deep down feel badly that I'm not, but I don't like that standard there because it makes me feel very uncomfortable. And so rather than me rising up to the standard, I want to take that standard down. So I'm gonna just attack it. And that's what you see fiercely in our culture. The last 50 plus years has been just constantly going after chastity and saying it used to be chastity is a virtue. And yeah, many people fall short. What they're actually saying is chastity is actually unvirtuous. It's inhuman. If you want to, it ruins people's lives, and that's the lie of the devil.
So people can dive more into, because I know we've just touched on the surface of your book of Love and Responsibility. Where can people get Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love? Where can they connect with you? Where can they learn more about focus and the important work that you guys are doing?
Great. Well, first, if they want the book, they can just go. They can find it anywhere on Amazon, wherever you want. Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. They go to my website, which is Edward Sri. So edwardsri.com. They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They can also find me on my podcast. I have a podcast called All Things Catholic with Edward Sri. I always tell people you have to put Edward Sri. If you just put SRI, you'll find an Indian Hindu guru, and I'm not that guy. Edward SRI.
After hours.
Yeah. So, and they can find Focus as well online as well, focus.org. Yep.
Okay. Well, I won't tell Curtis Martin what you're doing in your off hours with that other podcast. So, but
Curtis,
yeah. So make sure to, what's that?
Oh, I'm sure he loves that I have a podcast and can talk about Focus all the time.
He's probably a subscriber. And then also, Dr. Sri had talked about, struggling with chastity. Instead of saying, I need to pray more, how do you pray more? I also want to make sure to recommend you guys check out the Hallow app. Hopefully you already have this thing on your phone, but mine's tuned up, ready to go. Boom, you hit the button. You got your daily rosary that you can listen to different lives of the saints, Pray for what's going on in Afghanistan right now. There's a prayer chain going on with that. Listen to Bible stories in the evening time. I mean, there's so much awesome content on Hallow, and they're incessantly putting fresh content down there, whether it's praise and worship music, Gregorian chant, you name it, it's on this. So go to hallow.com/lustisboring. You get an access code. You'll get to try this out for free, or just click the link in the show notes. But again, I want to encourage y'all, make sure to check out Dr. Sri's book, Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. Once you get a taste of what's in this, you're going to want to read the whole Love and Responsibility. That's going to get you hooked on the theology of the body, and this is life-changing stuff. So again, Dr. Sri, thank you for coming on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Jason. God bless.
All right, you too.